Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
Once again, thanks for joining me here at the back of the range. I am your host, Ben Adelberg. This is episode 24. Another exciting week of golf with Arya Jutanugarn almost throwing away the U.S. Women's Open, but she didn't. Bryson DeChambeau did his best Tiger Woods circa 2008 U.S. Open playoff clinching putt impression after his winning putt at Memorial. And U.S. Open sectional qualifying wrapped up this Monday with amateurs and pros all over the country playing 36 holes in one day for the right to play the U.S. Open at Shinnecock later this month. We have many friends of the podcast that have been competing in the U.S. Open qualifying this year, so to those that made it through locals and even through sectionals, congrats on your incredible achievements. Speaking of the U.S. Open, we got a ton of great feedback from our last episode with our guest Mike Weeks. He played in 3 U.S. Opens. He had some truly incredible stories to share about how he got into golf in the first place and then decided to turn pro. Remember, all of our episodes are available for download at any time. If you want to learn more about the podcast, listen to all the episodes, make sure you check out our website, thebackoftherange.com. This week's guest is Ryan Howison from Jupiter, Florida. When I did my research on Ryan's path into the game, I knew I had to get him on the podcast. He played collegiately at UNC Chapel Hill, but it wasn't golf. It was baseball. See, Ryan never played college golf, but he did compete in the NCAA College World Series. He was the starting third baseman for the Tar Heels. Pretty cool stuff. In this episode, Ryan talks about his journey on the mini tours, Q School, and playing on the Web.com tour and winning, as well as his multiple stints on the PGA Tour. Before we get started, you know the drill. We are on Instagram, the Back of the Range Podcast. We also post on Facebook and Twitter. If you want to email me anything at all, suggestions on guests, some questions, ben@thebackoftherange.com. Oh, and one final thing. This conversation with Ryan went so well, and for so long for that matter, that we decided to break this into 2 parts. So this is part 1. I'll get the second part up as soon as possible. But for now, let's get things started. Let's welcome Ryan Howison to the Back of the Range. Ryan, thanks for making the time.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
So we've spoken a lot about your history playing on not only the PGA Tour, but also the Nike Tour, which is obviously now the Web.com. But through my research of your upbringing in the game of golf, I quickly realized that it's definitely not the norm. A lot of the people that we've spoken to here on the podcast have junior golf and high school golf and college golf backgrounds. Where did you grow up and when did you first start playing golf?
Yeah, Ben, it's definitely a little different journey than the typical professional golfer, and not necessarily one I would overly recommend, but it worked for me. I grew up in Ohio. In Ohio, the main sports at the time when I was growing up were football, baseball, and basketball. Those are the 3 sports that I played. I would play golf on a rare occasion. My grandfather, who was a member of Muirfield Country Club in Columbus, Ohio, he loved the game. My dad and mom would play once or twice a year. So it's not that I never played the game of golf. It just wasn't an emphasis. But certainly the other 3 sports were. When I moved to South Florida, as I was entering high school, I cut that down. I cut out basketball because, quite frankly, I just wasn't tall enough, fast enough, or could jump high enough. So I cut it down to football and baseball. Baseball was always my first love. And because I could throw in baseball, I was a quarterback for my high school team. From my sophomore year through my senior year, I was the starting quarterback. And not that we threw the ball a ton, but I really loved football also, so much so that I contemplated perhaps playing in college, only to thankfully realize I would have gotten beat up pretty badly. A 5'10", 165 pounder going to college, linebackers would have had their field day on me. But I was a good baseball player, so I had the opportunity to go to the University of North Carolina. I had a great time. My senior year in college, we played in the College World Series. I was the starting third baseman. And those experiences and times with teammates, things like that, are times that I would never give up. So often later in my golf career, people would ask me, do you wish that you'd have played golf growing up? Because coming from baseball and trying to enter golf, I was certainly behind the curve.
Sure.
And I tell people, I said, not a chance. I loved my experience playing baseball. The bus rides with the guys, the plane rides, the locker room. When you've got 25 guys or so, everyone had great personalities. It was sort of like being in a fraternity. And we just all had a common goal. The other great thing about baseball was you could go 0 for 4, but the team wins, and you had a great time on the bus ride home. There's not many times that I would go the equivalent of 0 for 4 golf, maybe shooting, 80,
Sure.
and feel like I'm going to have a good time driving home because it's such a individual game. So I really loved that experience. The opportunity to play in front of fans and have a great time and play the sport that I really loved was something I'd never give up. That being said, I also realized that I was a average player in college, and to ever play professional, you had to be extraordinary in college. I saw that. I played against future major leaguers, and I saw the level of difference between their ability and my ability. But that being said, I had a great time.
Sure.
Then when I got done with baseball, or actually the story is my junior year of college, I was doing sliding drill. And unfortunately, I did a head first slide, tore my rotator cuff, and had to have surgery. So I went to Alabama, had Dr. Andrews operate on me. And then I tried to come back. That was over a Christmas break, my junior year. I tried to come back and play baseball, which is in the springtime, and I wasn't fully healed. So I ended up tearing it again. So right at the end of my junior year, I had my second shoulder surgery. So within 4 months, I had 2 shoulder surgeries. And I wasn't allowed to throw a baseball that entire summer. So they said that I could do whatever it was that didn't hurt as long as it wasn't overhead motion. And I found that if I went out and swung a golf club, I had no pain. So instead of playing 30 games throughout the summer playing baseball, I just spent all my time on the golf course and went from shooting sort of mid 80s on a municipal golf course to shooting par a couple times by the end of the summer. And being that, naive 21-year-old kid, I thought, you know what? If I can take that many strokes off my game in 3 months, I can win the U.S. Open in 6. This game's not that hard.
It sounds logical to me. I mean,
it does.
I mean, I've only had one cocktail, but I'm listening to what you're saying, and that makes perfect sense.
It's math.
It's a numbers game, so I get it. All right, so you're basically using golf as kind of like a rehab activity because you can't do an overhand motion with your arm. So obviously golf is an underhand motion. So you're playing golf, you're drastically shaving strokes off your game. You're dropping from like a 12 handicap to a scratch relatively quickly. Did you still have aspirations of baseball a little bit just to continue out your college career, or were you already thinking at that point, hey, I might have something here, maybe I need to look at golf?
No, I went back after that summer and played my senior year, and that's the year we played in the College World Series. So obviously I still had aspirations for baseball. But on the same token, I realized if there was any inkling of any level of professional baseball prior to the first surgery, it was gone by the second surgery. So I knew I was going back simply to enjoy my senior year, enjoy my teammates, but my future in baseball was going to be over.
Okay.
But I did at that point reach out to the college golf coach because golf was also played in the fall, and just inquired, hey, could I come out for the team and try? Now, looking back, I think how foolish that is as somebody who literally hardly had played any tournaments, and just because they shot par a couple times or on a municipal golf course over the summer, that they could fathom playing Division I golf. But you're pretty bold when you're younger, so
Of course.
I inquired. Of course, he said probably not a great idea, but I had made up my mind that because golf was not going to be, or I'm sorry, because baseball was not going to be a future. My grandfather, who was a successful businessman and loved golf, had pulled me aside and said, "You know what? If you want to give golf a try when you graduate, I think you should do it." He was big at avoiding the what ifs of life. And he said, "You don't want to get to be 40 years old and think, what if I'd have given golf a try?" He said, "If you give golf a try for a couple of years and now you're 24 instead of 22, it's not going to change your business career at all." He said, "But you can't do it the other way.
Sure.
You can't go into business and then at 40 decide to be a professional golfer." He said, "So I'll back you for a couple of years. You'll see where it takes you, and then you'll make some determinations." Part of that is, he's supporting his grandson. Part of it is he loved the game and, he wanted somebody to root for and things like that. So that's what I did. I literally was on the driving range. We flew back from Omaha, Nebraska, the College World Series school. I had graduated. I got on the driving range. My uncle happened to be working with David Ledbetter on his game, and he connected me with Led, and I started working on my game. And I still have old VHS tapes of me starting out, and I look at those now and think, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? I mean, the swing was so bad. But it's one of those things where sometimes it's ignorance is bliss.
Sure.
And I just had a goal in my mind. I was going to figure out how to do it. And I think that's, and everything that I've done where I've been successful, I think that's been the mantra is it may not be the best, but I'll figure out how to get it done. And golf is a great sport like that. In baseball, somebody else evaluates your talent. So you could go 4 for 4, but somebody may say, "You know what? I don't think his bat speed's fast enough. I don't think he can make it to the next level." You don't really control your own destiny. In golf, you do, because you can shank it around the golf course and post a 69, and nobody's going to say, "You know what? You don't get to win that tournament because we don't think you have the ability to go to the next level." You won because you shot the lowest score. It's
Sure.
plain and simple. So I've always been very good at solving problems. And the problem you have in golf is you're standing on a tee and 450 yards away is a little hole, and you have to get the ball in that hole as fast as possible. And how do you do that? And I've always just taken that as a problem solving, and I'm going to find a way to get it done. And luckily I was stubborn enough to stay with it long enough to figure it out.
The other thing I'm thinking about right now is you never had the AJGA junior circuit to play in. You didn't play collegiately. You didn't have the USAM and the high level amateur competition. And yeah, maybe that's a weakness that you had to fight through when you're going up the pro ranks, but also you never had to watch what other amateurs were doing and say, wow, that guy hits at 300 on a string and doesn't move. And man, that guy chips and putts great. You didn't have that exposure. So you basically went into this on a clean slate and didn't have to compare yourself because you had no comparison.
That's 100% correct. And the other component of that was I would look at people and they, you'd find out they were All-American or something like that. And I would think, one, I don't care. And two, you didn't play in the College World Series. So I'm a better athlete than you are. So I don't really, you can take your All-American stuff, which it should be very well respected. But at the time I was like, I honestly don't care.
Right.
So let's tee it up. Let's find out who wins. And if you beat me, I'm just starting out. It's only a matter of time before I catch up.
Okay,
and that was my attitude.
Yeah, so and clearly, just by listening to you, confidence isn't really one of your problems. You have a little bit of that. So I can just imagine in your early 20s, you're just like me against the world. I'm just going to go chase this down and do it.
Yeah, I've always had confidence, and I one of the things that my parents and my grandparents always emphasized was, there's a clear line between being cocky and being confident.
Sure.
Confident is what you think inside, and cocky is what you say outside. So inside, I'm thinking all these things. I would never say them out loud.
Right.
I would never treat anyone the way that, in a way that I felt like, I'm going to beat you or anything like that. It was just my inner drive that I kept telling myself, I don't care what you've done. I don't care how you're shooting. Just give me time.
Yep.
And that would also be my fuel to work harder. And as I started playing against better and better players, I realized I've got a long way to go. So, there's certainly a lot of humbling components, but, I also had a work ethic that I'd stay on the driving range videoing my swing for 8 to 10 hours a day, seemingly every day, trying to get better. And then there's other components that I took from baseball. The primary one, and I'll never forget this, and to this day, I still remember this. We're playing a game early in the spring up in North Carolina, and it's kind of drizzling. It's probably 45 degrees out, kind of day where nobody wants to be outside. And we've got to play a game. And our coach came in and he said, 2 months from now, nobody's going to care what the weather was. They're going to look and it's going to find out either you won or you lost. So you can either go out there and say, oh, we lost, but it was cold and then it was rainy and we didn't have our best stuff because of that. He said, but the win-loss, there's no reason, there's no room for excuses. You go out and you get it done, or you just don't go play. And so that was, another thing that I always kept in mind is there's no excuse. I can't use the excuse, well, I didn't play college golf. I didn't play high school golf. I didn't really play junior golf. So of course I'm not going to be as good as they are. Well, that's just a cop out, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's truth to it, but if you believe in it, then if I believed in it, I felt like I was going to be in trouble.
Well, and the other thing that prepared you for, I would imagine, is that, obviously you can't play baseball in terribly inclement weather. I mean, there's a certain point where they got to call it because it's, it's a different sport than golf. But golf, you can play in any sort of weather. So I can't imagine how much that helped you during tournaments and qualifiers and you name it, when it's blowing hard or it's rainy or it's cold. You've already been through the worst of it. So I can't only imagine that must have helped you tremendously.
I'm sure it did, but truth be known, I'd much rather play in 80-degree and sunny and all that stuff. So
of course,
I try. We all go through that time where we look outside. It's like, oh my gosh, I really want to go out and play in this. And the tournament's a different story. I mean, you have to tee it up.
Yeah. But
the tough part is when you're on the road and it's a Tuesday and you need to go play a practice round and you look outside and you're thinking, oh, all I want to do is stay in bed today, but you've got to get up and go do your work because that's your job.
Sure. So you play in the College World Series in 1989. You're a walk-on that makes it as a starting third baseman. So that's the pinnacle of college baseball. And then you reach the pinnacle of professional golf. You earned your PGA Tour card through Q School in 1994. That's 5 years in between there. Can you tell me what was the low point in those 5 years? Was there ever a point in those 5 years where you're just like, I don't know if this is going to work? I
think there were some times when I certainly had that attitude. I'd be working on my golf swing and, you're not playing well and you're missing cuts and you're playing the mini tours where there's no money anyways, but yet entry fees are still pretty high and you still have travel expenses. But those were some of the most enjoyable times also because I was traveling with a bunch of guys who were in the same situation. So you're sharing hotel rooms, you're traveling together, you're all in your early 20s. So you're having a great time in life in general. So there certainly were some very low times with golf, but when there were, I had buddies of mine who were going through it with me, and some had more success than others, and at different times you can try to celebrate, in their success. And then there'd be the times when you're working on your golf swing and for the life of you, you just can't figure it out. And you're thinking, am I doing the right thing? Am I just totally wasting time here? Should I do something else? Am I ever going to make it? But, for me, because I started at such a low ability level, I mean, I thought I was decent, only to look back and say I was really bad in the grand scheme of professional golf, that I had a lot of upside room. Anybody who was at my ability and was practicing every day had to get better.
Sure.
So because I kept seeing myself getting better, I kept telling myself, I will stop when I feel like my game is not getting any better. And if I've never made it to any of the tours, then that's fine. But I'm just going, because I don't want to waste my money. I don't want to waste anyone else's money, and I don't want to waste time. But luckily, I could keep seeing improvement. It wasn't on a daily basis, but over a period of time, I could keep seeing some improvement. And the real turn came in 1994, where I went down to a little country called Trinidad and Tobago, and they had their National Open. And I went down there. I played great. I ended up winning the National Open, and I won $12,000. And at that time, that was more money than I could pay off my credit card. At that point, my grandfather had said, hey, I think you can do it on your own. You're making a little bit of money. You've got some credit cards. But I had credit card debt. And the fact that I could pay off my credit cards and have a little bit extra money. And it also got me into this tournament that's no longer in existence, but it was called the Gene Sarazen World Open, where anybody who had won a national open throughout the world was invited. So you had the U.S. Open winner, the Canadian Open winner, you had the Trinidad and Tobago Open winner. Think of the smallest country in the world. That winner was invited, and it was outside of Atlanta at the end of the year. And I was able to go and play in it. You got a 2-year exemption to it. And so in 1994, right before second stage of Q School, I played in that tournament. So I'd gotten through first stage, and back then first stage wasn't as difficult as it is today. I mean, you have to play really hard just to get through first stage nowadays.
Yeah.
But back then, as long as you kind of stayed upright and didn't hit every ball out of bounds, okay. But then I played in that Sarazen World Open, and I'm watching all these incredibly great players, and I am struggling all week because now I'm comparing myself with the best of the best and realizing how far behind I was of them. And I was so worn out from playing that tournament that I went to the second stage of Q School the next week. And I was a historical long practicer. I will wear myself out. I'll have a morning tee time and then be the last one to leave the range. I'll stay on the range, 5, 6, 7 hours working on my swing. I was so tired from the World Open, having done that I would go out, hit a few balls, go tee it up. As soon as I got done, put the clubs in the car and go back to the hotel. And I didn't hit one extra ball that whole week that I didn't, need to just to warm up. And I got through second stage for the first time. And then I thought, back then, as long as you got through second stage, you had some type of
something,
better status than you do nowadays for getting to finals. But at that point, I said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I've just been playing the Hooters Tour, and now all of a sudden I'm going to have some type of status on the Nike Tour." And that was just a huge encouragement to me. And then I happened to, went to finals and same type of thing. I mean, I didn't realize the magnitude of the event. I just was going out to play golf. And it was a problem solved. There's 6 rounds. I've got to try to figure out how to get through these 6 rounds. And I realized that there's a lot of people there that were really, really nervous and people that were a lot better players than I was and had a lot better resumes than I did. I was watching them and playing practice rounds with them, and even the first couple rounds teed up with a couple of them and watched how they played and how nervous. And I said, wait a second, this is now a level playing field because they're a lot better than I am, but they feel like there's more at stake because they should make it. I shouldn't even be here. So I went out and played I can't say carefree, but I played without a lot of worry. I probably, the sixth round, I probably only hit, 7 or 8 greens, but that was sort of my game. I was going to figure I didn't care. I was going to miss a green. I was going to chip it up. I was going to put it in, hit par, move on. And the greens I did hit, I was going to try to make birdie, and that was my game. And I ended up coming to the last hole of a course called Greenleaf. It was the ninth hole.
I know Greenleaf. I got a much more depressing story about Greenleaf, but yours sounds better than mine. But you go ahead about Greenleaf.
So the last hole was a par 4. Back in the day, you're using wooden drivers. So I ended up hitting a drive out there, and I got 4-iron into a pin that I had watched at the turn, guys coming in, trying to hit that green because you had to walk around that green when you were making the turn. And the pin was right over top of a bunker. It was on a downslope. And there's just no way. I barely saw anybody hold the green. So I'm coming in with a 4-iron because I didn't really hit it that well off the tee. And somehow I hit this 4-iron, hits on the upslope of the bunker, deadens it. It trickles down to 6 feet.
Oh.
And at that point, I knew I had to make it. And I'd been missing tons of putts coming in. My dad was caddying for me. And I told him, I said, you know what? I keep blocking every putt because at that point, I knew I was close and I want to make it. I kept coming up and out of putts. I said, I'm going to watch the ground after I putt and listen for it to go in to ensure that I stay down. And he says, go ahead. And I did it. And I probably only kept my head down for like a nanosecond after I hit the ball. And sure enough, it went in to get my card on the number. So now I'm really a guy who's in a place where he shouldn't be, because now I'm on the PGA Tour and I'm thinking, what? I don't even know what I've just done. I just know for the next 5 days, I woke up with a smile on my face and then had to remind myself of why I was smiling.
Oh, gosh. What a great story. Who was more nervous over that putt, you or your dad?
Oh, my dad was.
He was a mess, probably.
Come to find out later, he was extremely nervous.
Oh, gosh. I can't even. It's one thing when your dad goes and caddies for you and it's a one-time thing or a one-off tournament, but gosh, 6 rounds just for your card, for your job. Yeah, I bet it took him a little bit longer to recover from that than it did for you. So you get in, you're on, now you're a card-carrying member of the PGA Tour. This is 1995. Gosh, the things I remember about 95 was Pavin winning the U.S. Open. This
Shinnecock.
was Shinnecock. And let's see, this was the year before the Norman and Faldo Masters, so this is 95. That was Crenshaw winning the Masters that year. So just to kind of give our listeners an idea of kind of the scene, this is still a couple of years before Tiger breaks onto the scene. He won the USAM that year. What was the first tournament that you played? What was your PGA Tour debut?
Probably the top story that I have of my entire time on the PGA Tour. The first tournament that I had the ability to get into, I was not. So for those who don't know, when you get your PGA Tour card through Q School, you're not exempt. So you get in tournaments when there's space available, meaning all the other tournament winners and people that have finished higher up on the money list the year prior, they all have higher priority. So you get in based on availability and you're ranked. So because I made the card right on the number, I had a very low ranking. And so I wasn't getting into many tournaments. So I went to Hawaii, didn't get in. Now everybody gets into Hawaii. But back then, I didn't get into Hawaii, tried to Monday qualify, which is not a bad place to go for a week.
That's not a bad.
Whether you're playing or you're not playing. And then I was an alternate for the AT&T out of Pebble Beach. So I went out there, and my best friend, who's still my best friend to this day, he and I went out there, and we were hoping that we were going to get in. So I was third alternate. The tour told me I had a pretty good chance.
And who's your? I'm sorry. And who's your best friend? I'm sorry.
This guy named Brad Ball.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Brad and I had out there. They had so much rain that week that nobody was allowed to play a practice round. So as a result, a couple guys pulled out. Well, on tour, if tee times have already come out and somebody withdraws, the alternate then goes in the spot where that tee time was. So typically the tour tries to pair up sort of players that have the same pedigree. So tournament winners play with tournament winners, and Q school guys play with Q school guys. So you weren't going to get paired. Nowadays Q school guy is not going to get paired with Tiger Woods the first round.
Right.
So I happened to get paired because somebody pulled out. I was paired with Peter Jacobson, who always played with Jack Lemmon out there, who was kind of the icon. And my amateur partner is Jack Lemmon's son, who was also an actor. And because Jack was such an icon, he had the TV tee times. So right in front of us was Nicholas, who at that time I hadn't met, and some other people. The pairing behind us was Don Johnson, Vince Gill with Corey Pavin and the late Payne Stewart. And right behind them was Arnold Palmer. So I'm sandwiched in this incredible tee time grouping. Oh, mind you, I've never hit one shot on the PGA Tour yet, and I'm not quite certain how I even got on the tour at this point. So the rules official comes up to me and says, you got a pretty good pairing, and he tells me. And so I end up finding Peter Jacobson, Jake, out on the golf course, and everyone's just kind of walking it. And I tell him the predicament. He said, no problem, you'll be fine. So I teed up with him for 3 days, and he goes on to win the golf tournament. So I'm playing with Jake the first 3 days, and I'm watching some of the best golf I have ever seen. And thank God he won, because if he'd have finished like 30th playing the way he did, I probably would have just hung up my clubs right then and there and thought, there's no way I can beat any of these guys.
Sure.
He was hitting the ball incredibly flush and making putts. And Jack Lemmon was fabulous. He took us to dinner Brad and I to dinner at the tap room one night. Probably the most enjoyable is on Saturday we played Pebble Beach, and we had the TV times, and the cameras are following. They didn't show one of my shots, and nor should they have. But being in that environment was a lot of fun. Then afterwards, there was a players' dining at Pebble Beach. So we went in there with Jake and with Jack Lemmon and sat at a table and my parents came out and Brad's parents were out there, and we sat with Don Johnson and Vince Gill, and at that time Don was dating Melanie Griffith.
Yep.
And Clint Eastwood was dining with us, and the table next to us was Barbara Bush, who just passed away, and President George Bush, and Dan Quayle, the vice president. At some point we all sang him happy birthday, and Craig Stadler was there, and Brad and I are kind of looking at each other thinking, sort of what part, which part of the equation here doesn't fit in with the rest of it? And it's the two of us. So even at one point, I was telling my wife last night, when we were watching, that Barbara had passed. And I said, I actually ran into the back of her at one time. And the story was I went outside to make a phone call, and I'm on the phone, I'm looking sideways as we're walking back into this lunch tent. And all of a sudden I look up and I just see a sea of white in my eyes. Well, I ran into the back of her hair, and I didn't know who it was. So I reached out and I said, I'm so sorry, only to have Barbara turn around and say, oh, that's okay, blah, blah. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this is the first lady. So, or the former first lady. So that was Brad and I still, that's been 1995. So what's that, 23 years ago. And we still talk about that story. It was such a great week.
God. Well, there's only about 37 directions I want to go with this, but wow. So you're, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to digest the entire, the enormity of just that story. So yeah, Lemmon was basically the mayor out there. I know it was him and Jacobson and actually, yeah, now that you mentioned 95, so he won that and actually got him. That was pretty big on getting him onto the Ryder Cup team in 95. Behind the scenes, we see everything about the AT&T, with Bill Murray and all the celebrities. with all the tournaments that you played in, was that just the most over the top crazy with all of the attention and all of just the moving parts? Did that tournament just stand out above all the rest?
It did, but in a good way.
Yeah.
There was so much fun. The tea gifts that they gave you. I mean, I still have this enormous Waterford crystal, AT&T Pebble Beach engraved punch bowl. Was one of the gifts one year. Another year was these incredible Waterford crystal wine glasses. They were one of the tournaments that gave you some really nice, the pros, some really nice gifts. So, but outside of that, there was a different atmosphere because of the entertainers that were there, and people came out not to see golf but to see the celebrities.
Yeah.
My mom, who was following us, told us the story. We were at Pebble Beach one day, and people came up and they're trying to figure out, who's playing this hole and who's coming up the next hole. And they're standing there with a tee sheet, and we're passing them, and my mom overhears this girl and this guy say, who's this? And they said, well, that's Jack Lemmon and Peter Jacobson. And they said, well, who's coming up next? And they said, oh, it's Don Johnson and Vince Gill. They all said, oh, cool. Who are they playing with? And they said, oh, Corey Pavin and Payne Stewart. And they go, who are they?
Oh, God.
And you're thinking, all right, at that time, there were the best golfers in the world.
Yeah.
They've been around forever. And these people had no idea who they were. They weren't there to watch the golfers. No. They were there to see the celebrities. So it really was just an amazing event. Obviously, the venue, the vistas, everything were incredible. So I would say that was my favorite event to play in.
So you play in 1995 in the PGA Tour. You get into the tournaments you can get into. How did that year end?
So 95, I was unprepared for the PGA Tour. I just did not have the golfing skills required to play the PGA Tour. I could get the ball out there. I could get up and down, but you start putting me in long rough and long golf courses. It's tough to get up and down, from 60 yards versus because I've hit it in the rough and now I can't advance it far enough to get up near the green versus playing a golf course that has much lighter rough and you can advance it up towards the green and then figure out how to get up and down from there. So I had a very, very poor year, and I think I only made 4 or 5 cuts all year out of, I think I got into 19 events. So I do remember getting in, making my first check at San Diego, another tournament that Jacobson happened to win, by the way. I think he actually won back-to-back weeks, at AT&T and in San Diego. But it was definitely a learning experience. The part that I regret the most is watching the other guys too much and then trying to change my game to be more like theirs. So at that time, Greg Norman was probably the number 1 player in the world. So I'm watching him hit balls on the range. And as a matter of fact, I actually played a practice round with him in Georgia one time. And I could just, when you're outclassed, and you're outclassed in literally every component of the game. So he could hit it straighter, further, higher, putt better, everything, think better, more confidence, more experience. And I try to emulate, not necessarily Greg, but other players as well, sure, saying I have to hit the ball better and I have to do this and I have to do that. When in fact it was true, but I abandoned what had gotten me there, which was my short game. So then when I did start hitting it a little bit better, I'd miss a green and not get up and down where I would have before. So if I could do it all over again, I would have watched the other players to give me motivation to get better, but I would have made sure that what got me there was the short game. I would have made sure I continued to practice that and keep that sharp while I worked on the other parts of the game instead of just working on my deficiencies.
So you go back to, we'll just call it just for consistency purposes, you go back to the web. You played there in 96 to 99. You picked up 3 wins. You had 2 in Lakeland, 1 at the Ozarks Open. And then you get back in 2000, in the year 2000, you get back to the PGA Tour. before we talk about your second stint on the PGA Tour in 2000, what was one of the big differences that you saw? I'm sure there were a lot, but what was one of the big differences that immediately hit you when you jumped down from PGA to the web?
Well, and there's the obvious differences, and you were playing for a whole lot less money.
Sure, yeah. I guess I was kind of referring to just not just the money, but like, is the level of competition different? Did you see something that really jumped out at you when you went to that tour, or was it guys that were just as good enough to be on the PGA Tour that were working their way back?
What I think I noticed the most, the top 30 to 40 players in the world were just so much better than everybody else. The Ernie Els and the Normans and the Faldos and people like that. They were just heads and shoulders above everybody else. But then when you got down further than that, there was times when guys would play phenomenal, but then there would also be times when they would play very mediocre. And on the web.com tour, the guys who would play great were never as great as the top 30 players in the world that you had seen, but they were extremely talented. But then a lot of the other ones, and I would probably throw myself in many years into this category, were still trying to find their way, still working on their game, trying to get to the next level. Versus the PGA Tour, you're at the ultimate level. So now it's time to perform. On the web.com, you're sort of still in that trial mode. If I tweak my swing here, can I get up to the PGA Tour? If I work on this, or if I work out more, if I change my diet, can I get to the PGA Tour? So they were working towards getting better, versus the PGA Tour was more working about getting it done.
Right.
So I noticed that. So when I went back to the tours, I focused more on getting it done. So I was on the PGA Tour, I was trying to get a lot better. But when I went back to the web, I would try to get better. But when it was game time, I said, whatever I have, I've got to play with. I'm gonna stop trying to work on my swing while I'm playing, versus I need to pay bills and I need to try to get back out. Because once you've had a taste of it, you certainly want to get back, because you're treated like royalty when you have no reason to be treated that way. They definitely treat you far better. They treated me far better than I deserved to be treated.
And there you have it, another great episode here at the Back of the Range. Remember, this is part 1 of the Ryan Howison episode. Part 2 is coming up in a few days. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, the Back of the Range podcast. We're always posting on Facebook and Twitter. And again, if you have any questions, ben@thebackoftherange.com. Shoot me an email. We'll see you next time for part 2 of Ryan Howison's episode here at the Back of the Range.